By divine providence, tonight's lesson is actually taken from the current Torah portion that we will be reading this week, the portion of Toldot. So for those who are following along, in order to fully appreciate and to get what we will be doing tonight, I'm going to go through some of the basic verses of the story in our introduction. One of the things that I have been emphasizing in all the classes is to be able to view the stories of the Torah not as disparate stories, each one separated from the other, by centuries, geography, and context, but to see all the stories of the Torah, especially the ones in the book of Genesis, as an interwoven narrative that begins with creation, that in a sense, each one evolves and emerges from the previous episode. And tonight's lesson is no different, where we're going to focus on one of the classic stories of the book of Genesis of the Torah, the saga of the two brothers, the twins of Jacob and Esau, how the Torah describes the story and the drama, how it evolves from their time all the way until today, and how ultimately we see ourselves in this story as well. As we've been emphasizing again in all the classes, all of these stories only are fundamentally understood when we delve and we peel back the layers and get to a crucial identifying feature, which can only be really seen through the lens, I would call it a mystical or Kabbalistic lens of understanding the inner aspect of the story. There's always one crucial element to these stories that when one sees it in that sense, many of the aspects, the individual aspects of the story, come into focus on their own. And as we have been doing in all the classes up until now, we begin with a series of questions, 5, 6, 7 questions, and where classically each question has to be addressed on its own by the commentaries for thousands of years. Kabbalah is a flashlight. It's a light that shines on the crucial element, the crucible of the essence of the story, thus illuminating all the facets that seem to be troubling or perplexing, each on its own merit, but the story then comes into a different focus when we realize that there is a drama just beneath the surface that we're not always getting. So if you recall, we started the first class discussing the idea of how God had to create multiple creations and the series of the going from the tree of knowledge, and to allow Adam and Eve to understand the essence of knowledge on a human level rather than a divine level, where one incorporates evil and darkness into every aspect of its existence and uses it as a springboard and a challenge to overcome. Last week, we discussed the idea of the flood, which is that God needed the human element. The essence of that story is that God needs mankind to take responsibility for its actions in order for us to appreciate and to survive in this universe. We have to create an ark for ourselves. We have to create a society where we feel empowered, not that we are always receiving, but that we are empowered to give. And so the first era of creation was a top-down model, whereas post-flood, it's a bottom-up model. And tonight's lesson really is just the next evolution of this idea. And we're going to be obviously more specific, but to me, this story tells us a lot about how the Torah, the narrative of the Torah, is really so much more profound than maybe we give it credit for at first blush, and why these stories need to be revisited again and again and again. So let us begin. We're going to begin with the narration of the story in the beginning of the Torah portion. Much of the story is known by most people, by everyone here. I'm going to go over it somewhat on a basis. Basically, I'm going over the basic story, so we understand that what we're talking about, the questions when they arise, we're all on the same page. The Torah relates that after many years of Isaac and Rebekah, our portion begins. The portion of Todos, that it's many years that they are trying to have children, and a common theme of all of the book of Genesis, certainly the beginning, is the issue of barrenness by the matriarchs, the difficulty to conceive and to bring life into the world, starting from Sarah, it goes on to Rebekah, and it goes on to Rachel. And the Torah tells us that finally God blesses them, and Rebekah senses at some point in her pregnancy that something is not right. And in chapter 25, verse 22, it says, and the children are struggling within her. She is carrying twins. And she says, if so, why am I thus? And she goes to inquire. And the Torah tells us that God responds to her. Rivka is a prophetess, and she's given the information that you should know the reason why you are feeling so conflicted is because there are two nations within your womb, not just two individuals, but two nations. And two kingdoms from your inside will diverge. One kingdom will overpower the other, and the elder will serve the younger. And then the Torah continues to relate what happens when she finally gives birth. And behold, there were twins. And the first one comes out red or ruddy and hairy, and they called him Esau or Esau in Hebrew. After that, his brother comes out, and his hand is grasping onto the heel of his brother, and he is called Jacob, Yaakov, holding onto the heel. And then the Torah continues, and the youngsters grow up, and very quickly becomes evident the type of individuals that they will be in their lives. Esau is a man who knows game. He's a man of the field. He's cunning. And Yaakov is a wholesome person. He's a dweller of tents. He's a Yoshev Ahalim. And then in verse 28, the Torah relates that Yitzchak, Isaac, he loves Esau. Why? The Torah tells us because he tzayid bifiv, because there is game in his mouth. V'Rivka ohevet et Yaakov, whereas Rebekah prefers Jacob. She loves Jacob. This is the first part of the story. There are three crucial narrations that we're going to go through in this parsha, but I want to pause for just a moment and focus on a couple of things. From the very beginning, we have an issue. The fact that Rebekah is carrying twins tells us that there is a symmetry. There is an equality between them. They both come from the same parent, and yet there are crucial differences in appearance, character, and behavior. And so before they come into the world, Their mother is told that there's a battle of epic proportions that's playing out inside her womb. Okay, so I'm gonna catch up here. And she is told when she asks, what is the meaning of this fighting that's going on inside me? She is told that there are two nations in your womb and two kingdoms will diverge. Kingdom will overpower kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger. In other words, Rebecca is told that there's a struggle taking place, but it's not an ordinary sibling rivalry, the way we are accustomed to seeing siblings fight with each other. This is a cosmic epic struggle between kingdoms that are going to be fighting for each other. And this will continue for all of generations and from all of history. And that one will always be trying to assert its superiority over the other. And that when one is high, one will be low. Never shall the two be equal at the same time. And as it becomes clear, when they grow up, we are told that immediately at their bar mitzvah, when they turn 13, it becomes obvious their roles in life. Esau is a man of the field. He's a hunter. He is a cunning. He's this very deceptive person. And whereas Yaakov is the wholesome wholesome scholar, a man of the tents. The contest is not just between these two brothers. It seems to play out between the parents as well. The Torah makes the point immediately that each one of the parents chooses a side. That Isaac prefers one, he prefers Esau, he loves Esau, and Rebecca loves Yaakov. It's obvious here again that the Torah is trying to hint at something, because why can't it be that, why do the parents have to choose sides? Why can't the parents both love their children unconditionally? Why do we have a situation where their parents, so to speak, are drawing lines and each one is choosing one of the twins? The Torah doesn't tell us exactly why Rivka favors Yaakov. It just says, Rivka ohevet et Yaakov. When it comes to telling us why Isaac prefers Esau, the Torah tells us, Kitzayid befiv, because he had cunning in his mouth. We'll get to that, what that means exactly. But the Torah concludes that Rebecca loves Yaakov without telling us why. It would seem to be self-explanatory that a Jewish mother prefers the straightforward, wholesome child, the mensch, as they say, the scholar, rather than the wild Meshuggah. But it's also true that Rebecca was the one who was the recipient of this prophecy, that you have two kingdoms. Isaac wasn't privy to this. Rebecca was told this prophecy. And so Rebecca must have understood that when she was told, Varav Ya'avot Sa'ir, the stronger, greater, more powerful one will be the one who serves the younger one, she must have understood that that's why she must lean toward Jacob, because Jacob would be the one whom the destiny of this prophecy would materialize. These roles are going to take on a greater significance later on in the story that we'll get to in just a few moments. So let us take stock just of the story so far, and what seems strange, and that is that the struggle for Esau and Jacob, the struggle between these two brothers, begin while they are still in the womb, before they are even born. And their mother receives a prophecy that the contest between them will span generations, if not all of history, and that ultimately the elder will serve the younger, the more powerful will serve the weaker. Esau is born first. He is a hunter, a man of the field. He is a sophisticated individual, while the younger Yaakov, is the wholesome, more simple, straightforward person. What is the meaning of this prophecy, as you see on your screen? What was God trying to relate to Rebecca, that there are two kingdoms here and they're fighting? What are these two kingdoms? Who are they? And what are they fighting over? Why was it necessary for Rebecca to know this while she was carrying them in her womb? If ultimately, question number two, If Jacob is supposed to lead, then why is Esau the elder one? Why did God create Esau to be the firstborn and Jacob the younger one, if the intention was that Jacob was supposed to be the one to dominate, as the prophecy indicated, that the elder will serve the younger? Why create this asymmetry? Why not just make Yaakov first, Esau second, and then there wouldn't be any conflict between the brothers? Number three, why does Isaac prefer materialistic Esau over spiritual Isaac, while Rebekah sees it the opposite way? The Torah does not tell us in the beginning. It makes the statement. It makes it as a straightforward statement that Isaac immediately chooses Esau as his favorite, and Rivka chooses Yaakov. In order to get to the second series of questions, we need to go to the next part of the story. The story continues that it came to a point that Isaac was well on in age, and the Torah tells us that his eyes begin to dim. He cannot see well. And he calls for his favorite eldest son, Esau. And in chapter 27, verse number 1, he says, "My son, I have grown old. I don't know when my end will be. But I want to bless you before I die. So please pick up your sword and your bow and go out into the field and trap game for me and make me the delicious food that you know that I like and bring it to me so I will eat, and therefore I will be able to bless you." And in one of the great dramas in all of the Bible, and perhaps certainly maybe in all of religious literature, we read how his wife Rebecca is listening in surreptitiously to this conversation between father and son, and she immediately runs over to Jacob and to Yaakov. She tells Yaakov, "Listen to me, to what I am telling you right now. I just heard what your father told Esau. Run right now and get me 2 goats for your father, and you will bring it to your father, and I'm going to prepare it just as he likes it, so that he should bless you before he dies." And Jacob responds, he says, Mama, what are you doing to me? What kind of nonsense is this? My brother Esau is a big, burly, hairy, hirsute individual, and I am a ish chalak, I am a smooth person, both physically and in temperament. I will be found out in an instant. Brother and I, Esau and I, are nothing alike. And you want me to go get this blessing from dad this way? I'm not going to get no blessing. You know what's going to happen? It's going to be a disaster. I'm going to get cursed. Instead of getting nothing, I will walk away with a curse rather than a blessing. And Rebecca tells Yaakov, "Listen to me. Alai kilalat chabani, the curse will be upon me. You have nothing to worry about. Just do what I say." You know, when you read this parsha, you tend to think these were little children, and that Yaakov was listening to his mother and Esau was listening to his father. The truth is, they were well on in years. They were they were older people, and you see the tremendous obedience and dedication that they have to their parents. In any event, the Torah continues how Rebecca disguises Jacob in some of the clothing that her elder son Esau had left behind at home, and she dresses him, and she puts the fur around his neck, and he comes to his father, and he tells his father, "I'm here." And he goes, "Who are you, my son?" He goes, "I am Esau, your firstborn." And Isaac says, "Please approach me so I can feel you." And he goes, are you my son Esau or not?" And without waiting for a response, Jacob does not respond. He just approaches to his father, and his father feels him out, and he says Hakol kol Yaakov, the voice is the voice of Jacob. V'hayadayim midei Esav, the hands, though the hands feel like the hands of Esau. He did not recognize him, but he gives him the blessing. And the blessing that he gives him is related in chapter 27, verse 20 and 29, that God should give you the dew of the heavens, the fat of the earth, the abundance of grain and wine. Nations will serve you, kingdoms will bow to you, you'll be a master of your brothers, and you shall be blessed. In summary, in summation, Yitzchak, we know, it intends to give the blessing of the dew of the heavens and the fat of the land, the blessings of materialism and physical superiority to Esau, his favorite son. But Rivka outwits her husband, her elderly, blind husband, and she inserts Yaakov into the scene, and Yaakov gets the blessing. Before we're going to go forward, I'm going to lay out a couple of questions, then I'm going to ask if people would like to chime in with some of the questions you may have. The reason why this is such a Jewish story is because the first thing that jumps out, maybe as a rabbi, is that Isaac tells his son Esau, listen, I want to give you a blessing. I want to give you the most important blessing of my life. But first, you got to bring me dinner. We have to make a kiddush. Before you can daven, we have to have kiddush. Before I can give you a bracha, we got to have cholent. I need you to give me the best dinner you've ever come up with before my soul will be able to give you this blessing. What is going on over here? He can't give him a blessing. He has to call him in and make this whole condition that you have to go hunting and make me dinner and make me a barbecue. And then I'm going to give you the blessing, the great blessing that the father wants to give his child. Why is food such an important role in the story, this kind of tasty food? Maybe this is something that's been hanging over our subconscious in the beginning of time, that we can't do anything on an empty stomach. It kind of starts with Isaac, that we can't even think about making a bracha, giving a blessing to someone. We can't even think about praying without having coffee and cake. Where does it all come from that a father cannot give a blessing to his son, the most important blessing he wants to give him, only after he brings him dinner? A more basic question is, I mentioned earlier that the Torah relates very plainly that Isaac preferred and loved Esau and Rebekah loved Jacob. The question is, how can it be that two parents should be on such diametrically opposing sides? Let's take a step backwards. What kind of marriage did Isaac and Rebekah have in the first place, where they're each operating behind each other's backs? I mean, I know we can joke about the prototype of a Jewish marriage, but it seems like each one is working behind the other one's back and is conniving and is trying to figure out how to undermine each other. Did they never have an opportunity to discuss between each other their children and the pros and cons of each one of their behavior, and to have an idea about how they're going to raise their children? That the Torah should say at the very outset that they're picking sides. Isaac loves Esau and Rebekah loves Yaakov. They can't both love both of them. Why does the Torah have to play it out this way? Number two, Isaac is one of the patriarchs. He's a tzaddik. He's a wholesome tzaddik. Actually, in some ways, the Torah tells us there was a spiritual preference that Isaac had that none of the other patriarchs had, and that's why we're going to read in this week's we read in the Torah portion that when there was a famine in the land, we're going to read that in Parshas Toldos, that Isaac wanted to go down to Egypt. Israel had famine after famine. When there was a famine at the time of Abraham, he goes to Egypt and he goes to Avimelech in the king of the Philistines. Soon we're going to read in a few portions that the all of Jewish history took a detour because of a famine that forced Jacob and the 12 tribes to go down to Egypt, to Joseph, and from which they never ever returned back to the land of Israel. So another theme that we find in the book of Genesis is a famine keeps happening that forces our patriarchs out of the land of Israel to find greener pastures, so to speak, elsewhere. When this happened in the time of Isaac as well, his impulse is to do exactly what his father did. But Hashem comes to him. God says, Isaac, you cannot go down. Shechon ba'aretz, remain in the land of Israel. Isaac never ever leaves the land of Israel. Why did we are told, our sages tell us, because he was brought upon the Akedah, as his whole body became holy as an offering to Hashem. He became holy in a level that his father Abraham, his son Jacob, never attained. He entered the Garden of Eden alive for several years, and as such, he obtained a certain holiness from which God never wanted him to even leave the land of Israel for a moment, even during a famine. And so he had to remain in Israel his whole life. Isaac is seen as an elevated spiritual perfect offering, not because he was willing, not because he ended up doing it, because he was willing to be offered on the Akedah. Remember, Isaac is not a little lad, a child, despite what you may have seen in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Isaac was a full-grown man of 37 years old at the time of the Akedah, which means that he had to either agree or to allow himself, he probably had to climb himself up. There was no way his elderly dad was going to offer him on the Akedah. Many people assume that his father forced him and that it's a story of a child and a parent. But Isaac was a lot more fit and a lot stronger than his dad at that point in the story. Abraham is 137 years old at the time of the Akedah, and Isaac is 37. Tell me who had the ability to walk away should they have wanted to. And yet we see Isaac, with all his holiness, with all his deep spirituality, in a way that's even more profound than his father and his son that would come after him. And yet he is so easily missiled by his son Esau that he seems to prefer him. What exactly does a spiritual giant, and Isaac, see in a cunningly deceptive hunter of Esau, rather than the Yaakov who's sitting and studying Torah all day, who's the wholesome, perfect mensch scholar? What is going on here? How is it that Isaac makes this preference? And why is it that Rebekah and Isaac cannot talk amongst themselves about what's going on with their children? Why does Rebekah need to deceive her elderly husband in this kind of way? It seems unseemly to use at the very, very least. And again, that Rivka has to make dinner also for her husband. This whole story is coming across as this big Thanksgiving dinner. By the way, parenthetically, I'm not going to get into it because it will open up a whole other series of questions. According to the commentaries and according to our sages, this actually took place on the night of Pesach, on Passover. It was actually the Seder night, which opens up another whole series of dramas about how this took place and why the Seder was the setting for these blessings. But the reason why Isaac is asking on the surface for Esau to do it, to go out and bring him two types of dishes, and Rebekah asks for 2 goats. You ever ask yourself, how much can Isaac eat for dinner? 2 goats? What kind of appetite did he have? Most people, even if you're very hungry, how much of 1 goat would you be able to eat? How much of 1 turkey can one person eat at Thanksgiving? And you're going to have 2 goats? Who's she cooking for? This was meant to be only 1 dinner for Isaac, just that he should quell his hungry stomach so he can give the blessing, because as we established, no Jewish parent can talk to their children on an empty stomach. But really, for this, you need to have two goats. But one of the classic answers is that this was because this was the Seder. As we know, the Seder, there are two offerings. He wanted to bring the Pesach offering, where the Torah required later on to bring the Karban Pesach and the Karban Chagiga. At the time of the temple, every family would bring two offerings on Pesach, the Pesach offering and the one for Chagiga, which is why, incidentally, on our Seder plate, you notice that on the top we have two cooked items. Till today, we have the shank bone and we have the hard-boiled egg. Everything else is of later origin and represents the suffering, and it represents the trials and tribulations of Egypt. But the top two represent the Exodus, the night of the Exodus, where we have the two cooked items, which are the two offerings that were done at the time of the temple. In any event, in summation, we asked a series of questions. Number one, who are these kingdoms and what are these kingdoms fighting over? What is the meaning of this early dream that Rebecca's having? Number two, what is all this thing about food? Why the focus on the food, that he needs so much food to be made for him before he can give the blessing? Go ahead and give the blessing. What's going on over here? Number three, why did the blessings have to come about through this means of deception? And number four, why does God create this drama? If God wanted Yaakov to get the blessings, if God wanted Yaakov to be the firstborn, make him the firstborn in the beginning. Why do everything upside down, make Esau the firstborn and make Yaakov hold his heel and create this whole drama that the brothers should hate each other and that Yaakov was always struggling against his older, stronger, more powerful brother? And what is the story here that God is trying to create of this animosity between the brothers? And so, my friends, before we get into some of these answers, we're going to take a step back and realize that what's happening here is that our sages tell us that there are four ways to look at the story, two of them classic and the other two more mystical, and we're going to take them one by one. Let's look at some of the classic understanding of the story. Esau, our sages tell us, is the father of Rome, of Western civilization. He's the king of Edom, that represents the power and the might of Rome, of Greece, of Rome, of Western civilization. That is the historical legacy of Esau, which represents materialism, self-realization, and tohu. I'm going to put it all up on the board for you at once so you can see what we're talking about here. Yaakov is the father of the Jewish people who are named Israel, and Esau fathered the nation of Edom, which is associated both in the Bible and the prophecies and in Talmudic and Midrashic literature as the power and the culture of the Roman Empire. This is the basic meaning, our sages tell us, of the meaning that the two empires, the two kingdoms, the two nations are fighting with each other. Really what they were talking about, what they were telling Rebecca, was that for the rest of history, the Jewish people and Rome are going to be at odds with each other. You see, 2,000 years ago, our ancestors clashed in a cruel and bloody conflict that really lasted for centuries. In the first century BCE, the Romans initially came control the land of Israel. And then in the year 68, 69, after a relatively short period of independence by the Hasmonean kingdoms that we're going to celebrate Hanukkah in just a few short weeks, and a number of rebellions that were ill-fated, the Holy Temple was destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed. The Jewish people were exiled, and Israel, as a sovereign independent state, of the Jewish people was no more for 2,000 years. Not only that, not only the geographic exile, but Judea and the observance of the Jewish faith and religion was crushed by the Roman Empire. Rabbi Akiva and the rabbis taking the brunt of it, where studying and teaching Torah was punishable by death. So on the seemingly in the surface of it, it doesn't seem to be a contest at all. The struggle that Rebecca was told about these two nations fighting with the other, that one will be high, won't be low, seems to be a no contest. A tiny nation, no power, no real military to speak of, homeless for much of its history. And on the other hand, you have a vast and powerful empire which evolved into a dominant global culture all around the world that we owe our, what we call the values of civilization, of law, of philosophy, of art, all the classic knowledge that we would give credit to under the heading of Western civilization. There was a clash 2,000 years ago. Rome seemingly was triumphant while Judea, Israel, was decimated in exile. But as the Torah tells us throughout the Tanakh, the Jewish people cannot be viewed through those classic paradigms of how we look at Esau, of Yadayim Esau, the hands. We are seen through the prism of Kol Yaakov, the voice of Jacob. Power, influence are not measured by population, size, wealth, or military might. 2,000 years after the defeat, after our crushing defeat, we are still a presence in the world, a formidable presence in terms of our contributions to the world. And one can say 2,000 years later, it's not so clear which of these two kingdoms will have the greatest impact when all is said and done. Will it be Rome or Jacob, or Judea? Who will be more dominant at the end of human history? We can talk about some of the examples, but what Rome symbolizes is the idea of ambition, materialism, quest for power. Whereas the Torah, through the prism of Judea and Jacob, is spirituality, discipline, morality, generosity, social justice, commitment, mutual responsibility, and ultimately, perhaps even the most important, peace, the pursuit of peace over military might. So when you look at your first, at this chart, the top two are what the classic commentaries discuss were what these two nations represent. Jacob represents Judea, the future, the history of the Jewish people. Esau represents Rome. Esau represents the idea of materialism for materialism's sake, the idea of power. And Yaakov is the man of the tents, spirituality. But we want to take it one step, two steps deeper, whereas Kabbalah understand that Esau and Jacob represent two more inner conflicts. They're not just two nations in the conventional sense that are fighting each other, dominant cultures that are fighting for whose vision of the world is more compelling, a more materialistic or spiritual vision of the world, but it's also an internal realization, and that is Esau represents the idea of self-realization, the idea that we all have two souls within us, and the Tanya tells us. We have an animalistic soul and we have a godly soul. The animalistic soul fuels our self-realization about what we want for ourselves. It fuels our independence. This, the Talmud tells us, was the inner meaning that when Isaac told Jacob that the voice is the voice of Jacob and the hands are the hands of Esau, the Talmud asks, the obvious question. We don't have time for brevity's sake, because we don't have time to go into every detail of the story. The story is so vast and so deep. But one of the questions that many of you may be having is that even on a basic level of the story, that it seems like Isaac suspected that his son Jacob was deceiving him, because he asked him to come closer. He says something is wrong, and he says he feels him out. He senses something is amiss, and that's why he says the words Hakol Kol Yaakov. The voice sounds like Yaakov. The hands feel like Esau, and then he goes ahead and blesses him. Let me ask you, friends, if you are at this momentous time, giving over the last blessing of your life, seemingly, that you've planned this whole, you've set up this whole grand scene with the food, sending out Esau to go hunt and to bring it back because something connected to that meal is going to bring out this blessing. And you know that you need to give this to your favorite son, who is Esau. And he feels like he's being deceived at this moment in his life, and he's unsure. What would you do in that situation? Would you just go ahead and give the blessing? Or would you try to ascertain a little more closely what's going on over here? But it seems that Isaac goes, oh, it's 50-50. It's one of the two. It's either Jacob or Esau. If I have to go by his voice, it's Jacob. If I have to go by his hands, it's Esau. And then he just seemingly disregards his apprehensiveness of being deceived, and he goes ahead and gives the blessing to Jacob. The Talmud tells us that really what happened here is, on a deeper level, is that Isaac was actually giving a blessing where he was dividing the blessing in half. The blessing of the voice, the blessing of the spirit, the blessing of prayer and study, he was giving to Jacob. He was always intending to do that. The blessing of living with your hands, of living with power, of living with dominant physicality, he was always going to give to Esau. He was splitting the blessings. Of course, he knew who Jacob and Esau was, and we'll develop that in a moment. But in his mind, the blessings that Jacob needs are the blessings of spirituality. Jacob has no interest in materialism. Jacob is a tzaddik. What am I going to bless him? With the dew of the heaven and the fat of the land? What is Yaakov going to do with those kind of blessings? Yaakov needs blessings that he should finish the Talmud, and that he should have an open heart and soul to study as much Torah as he can, and he should have communion with angels. He should have the gift of prophetic powers. He should have tranquility. He should have peace, spiritual peace. Esau needs to get what he needs. What does Esau need? Esau needs an AK-47. Esau needs good weapons. Esau needs the blessings to fully develop what his nature is, and that is to take on the world, the physical world. And so that's why when he says the voice of Yaakov, the hands of Esau, he says, I want to give each one the blessing that they need. And he was trying to bless them. He was trying to split the blessing. Nevertheless, he goes ahead and he blesses Yaakov with the blessing that he was going to give Esau, the Tal Hashemayim Shmanei Haaretz, the dew of heaven and the fat of the land. On the deepest level of Kabbalah, and this is what I want to spend a few minutes on, and I apologize in advance because this is if it's going to be a little bit subtle, because this is a very, very delicate concept, and it's a very, very profound and deep concept of Kabbalah, and so therefore I will try to leave some time where we can talk just conversationally if people have questions. Look at the two bottom words of your chart, because in my opinion, understanding these two words will allow you to understand the essence of this whole story, not just this whole story, but really a lot of the stories of the Torah, even going back to the stories of Adam and Eve, Noah and the flood, and our story, and the story going forward that we have not covered. These two themes are a run-on of these two words are a run-on of the theme that we started in class number 1. But here is where the Kabbalah gives it actualization of language, these two classic words, to understand what they mean. Tohu and tikkun. Tohu and tikkun. You may have heard these terms before. The word tohu means emptiness or chaos. The word is actually in the Torah. It's from the very, very beginning of Bereshit, of Genesis. And when God creates the world, the very beginning it says, Va'aretz hayat tohu vavo. It was empty and vast, but the word tohu means it was chaotic. It was in a period of transition. It was this vast emptiness of potential. The word tikkun means to fix. The word tikkun means rectification. The Kabbalists teach us that when God created the world, he initially created a world of tohu. That's why it says, V'ha'aretz hayata tohu vavo. Hayata means in the past tense. When one reads Genesis faithfully, in that sense, you would translate Bereshis means before the beginning. Bereshis does not mean in the beginning. When you have the letter bet at the beginning of a word, it means before. Bereshit, because in the beginning is Reshit. The Torah could have just said Reshit or Batchila. Bereshis means before Reshis, before the beginning. The Haaretz Hayata Tovavo, the Torah is hinting that there was a creation that preceded our creation. Before the 6 days of creation that we inhabit, the world of the 6 days in Shabbat, there was an earlier creation of Tohu, as the Kabbalists point out, and the Arizal discusses, that there was a world of great chaos that eventually crumbled under the weight of the chaos called Shvira. Shvirat HaKelim, there were vessels that were shattered because of the immensity of the chaotic light. And God needed to recreate a new world called the world of Tikkun. So originally there was a world of Tohu that God created. And from the ashes and from the, so to speak, from the remnants of the world of Tohu, God created a new world called the world of Tikkun. Let us discuss a little bit, let's flesh out what these things mean, Tohu and Tikkun, because as I said before, to me, this is the essential kernel, this is the essential idea that's going to allow us to take a step back and realize what's going on, not just in this story, but in all the stories, and then have a much greater and deeper, profounder and more profound appreciation for what was happening between Isaac and Jacob, between Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Esau, and indeed between all of the narration. But what's going to be even more important is, what does the story mean for us today? Okay, Tohu and Tikkun, the world of chaos and a world of rectification. Kabbalah explains that when God created the world, God created the world with lights and vessels. All of energy is a combination of lights and vessels. What does that mean? Lights and vessels. That the light of Tohu was extremely powerful and intense, and there prevailed a state of abundant light and scant and very, very weak vessels. And because the vessels were unable to contain the light, they shattered and fell. And following that, a new reality was made, a world of tikkun, with scant light, but abundant vessels, with the result that the lights are sustained within the vessels. This is the language of Kabbalah. To speak plain English, as they say, in the language of Kabbalah, light is the essence of something. It's the pure energy, whereas the vessel is the structure that shapes and executes and gives form to that energy. Everything in this world is a combination of tohu and tikkun in that sense, but we're going to learn is also a structure of orot and kalim is the language that Kabbalah uses. Orot means light, kalim mean vessels. Everything has a light and a vessel. It has the essence of the energy that God gives, created, and that energy is housed in a particular type of vessel. Let us look at some examples of what a light and a vessel might mean, because you may be asking, what do you mean? Everything that God creates is energy. It's all a light. How did we determine what's considered a light and what's considered a vessel? And why did God need to create lights and put them in vessels? Why can't we just have light without vessels or vessels without light? What is this gibberish of light and vessels? So let me give you some examples of how we understand how everything in creation, everything in this world is this balance of light and vessel, because all of life and all of creation, all of the universe indeed, is dependent upon the relationship between these two. So let's look some examples of what we might imagine would be the energy of something and the structure that the vessel gives. Okay, you see in front of you a book. Okay, when you look at a book, what is it? When you're reading a book, what are you reading? You're reading something that someone conceived of and put into written form. The ideas, the thoughts is the light. But how does one articulate thoughts to somebody else? We write it in a book. We use letters, we use words, grammar, syntax, punctuations. The book, which means the physical book, the pages, the papers, and the words, is the vessel that houses the idea. So when someone asks you, what is a book? A book is a combination of orot and kalim. It's a light and a vessel. It contains an idea that the idea is housed within these words. And dependent upon the skill of the author, about how much passion and energy they can put into those words, gives us an idea about how much light versus how much vessel, the ratio, the interplay between those. Some books we read, the structure is very dense. It's just a lot of words that contain very few ideas. And sometimes there are very, very profound ideas that seem to be bursting from the pages, and the words don't do justice to the idea, because here we see the relationship between light and vessel, between essence and structure. Let's look at another idea. Music. A melody contains emotion. It also has musical notes, or we can even talk about um, it has verse, it has words to it. In Hasidic terminology, a nigun, a melody that has no words, comes from an even deeper place because it cannot be contained by words. The essence, the light is so strong that it doesn't allow itself to be contained by a vessel. Remember, the more structure you put around something as a vessel, the more finite the energy becomes, because it's going to be colored by the type of words. And that's why when you listen to a song, the melody can transport you emotionally to one place, but the words, the chorus, or the verses then take you somewhere else, because the verses in many ways capture or hold hostage the melody, depending upon what words the composer decides to use. In the world of business, what would be the light? What would be the R of a business? It could be the vision, the objective. A business strategy is a vessel. In a relationship, every relationship, what would be the R? Would be the passion, would be the love, would be the energy. But every energy needs to have a vessel. If you have no mutually supportive actions, if you don't do anything to create a vessel for that energy, not only does you have no way to relate it, it can actually be destructive. And ultimately, in religion, in the way we live as people, as Jews, we can use religion as an example, that beliefs and values would be an example of light, What do we what did what is what do we believe in? What do Jews believe in? What is the essence of our faith? But we know that just to believe and to say I believe in God, or that I love God, or that I love people, but without ritual and practice and mitzvah, without the vessel to structure and incorporate and direct that light, the light remains this effervescent idea that has no practical relevance, maybe not only in our lives, but in the world. It has no way to relate, and it remains just an idea. It remains a light that cannot be captured by a vessel. The way the world is, my friends, is that we need to have both. God gave us the light and the vessel. The light is the energy, it's the gift, it's the inspiration. And the vessel is what allows us to actualize and to execute and to bring the light into a purposeful purpose. So, as it's very obvious why we have to have lights and vessels, the example that we used before about a book that has words but no ideas is hardly a book. It's just pieces of paper with nonsensical letters and ink on it that has no coherence and has no purpose whatsoever. The flip side is true too. Ideas, you can have all the great ideas. Ideas without words is also not a book. It's not even communicable. A person can have all the greatest ideas in the world, but if he has no way, he's unable to communicate it to anyone. If I have no way to transmit my great plan, then your great plan is great. It's the most, it might be the greatest idea in the world, and it might be able to bring them aside. But if you can't communicate it, if you can't illustrate it, if you cannot share it, then all it does is it remains some great light out there in the nether spheres, but without no vessel, it also dissipates and disappears. And every example that we went through before has the same similar idea. People who love each other, but there are no vessels for that love. There's nothing there. There's no relationship. There's no interaction, because an interaction requires supportive action. Those kind of relationships are fantasy. People say, "Oh, I love this. I love that person," but your person can love someone in the abstract. You know, you love something or an idea about something, but until you have to do something or live with something and do things day to day that somehow contain that love in a vessel, it's a fantasy. On the flip side, a vessel that is devoid of feeling and passion is also not a relationship. And so too with all the other examples that we have, the same thing is true that a religion where you only have faith, but there are no mitzvot, there are no vessels, there are no rituals, there's nothing that we can do to bring faith into our lives, is not Judaism. Other faiths exist that way, but Torah and Judaism say that that's not faith, that's not Judaism at all. It's an idea. God put us into this world to execute an idea into reality. But at the same token, doing rituals and doing mitzvahs, but lacking passion, lacking the light that we do every mitzvah only because we want to execute something. In the same way, we are in a relationship where we're doing mutually supportive things. We're taking out the garbage and we're cooking dinner, but there's no oomph to it. There's no light behind it, why we're doing it. Also lacks the light. You have a big, heavy, thick vessel, but it's devoid of any type of aura, of any type of light. And ultimately, God created a world of orot and kalim, light and vessels, and that they have to interact with each other, each one to support the other. So, of course, each one is going to have advantages and disadvantages. Back to our screen. The advantage of tikkun, remember, tikkun represents the world, the second world of less light but a lot of vessels, is that it's more harmonious, but it lacks passion. Tohu, the original world that God created, where we had a lot of light but scant vessels, the advantage might be that it's very passionate, it's very aggressive, but it's not stable. If you see in the example that Kabbalah gives, example of Tohu is if you take a plastic cup, or you take a glass cup and you put it under a very heavy flow of water, the water is going to bounce in and bounce out. And if the water is powerful enough, it'll actually shatter the glass, even though the purpose of the cup is to hold water, and that's what you're putting inside. Yes, the cup is designed to fill up water a little bit at a time until it gets to the top. But if you hit it with such power, even though that's what the cup is made for, the cup is not built to withstand that type of power. It'll break and it'll lose the very purpose of why it was there in the first place. This is how the Kabbalah understands what happened at the beginning. God created a world of tohu, all light, very, very thin vessels, very little cups, big light. He has showered the world with light. But you know what happened? The vessels shattered because the water was so overwhelming. But then God picked up the shards and God created thicker, hardier vessels and then dialed back the light and created a new world called Tikkun, a world that's more stable, but it lacks the power, this great spiritual, unbridled, passionate power of which God intended to create the world in the first place. So here we see that there are advantages and disadvantages on both sides, and we want to talk about why God created the world this way. Because this answer also answers all the other questions that we had before about the previous stories of the Torah too. Remember, we asked, why did God create a Garden of Eden if God was then going to exile Adam and Eve? Why did God create a world if he was going to destroy with a flood and then recreate it afterward with Noah? Why create a world of tohu and then destroy it if you knew it wasn't going to work and then create a world of tikkun? My friends, the depth of Kabbalah in a sentence is that the paradox of life is that God wants to give us the benefits of both. If we want to understand it really in a sentence, the underlying model of all of creation and every single story of the Torah, it is this crucial idea, and that is, each model by itself has an advantage but a disadvantage. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden had the advantage of great spirituality, but no independence. The world of Noah before the flood had everything given to them, but nothing of their own volition, nothing that was a bottom-up model. And because there was no personal stake in it, society crumbles. In other words, what Torah is trying to tell us through these stories that are really unfolding one from the other is that we live in a world that is a composition of two opposites, of light and vessels, ideas and structure. And the determination of what will overwhelm what, of what's stronger than the other, is strictly in the ratio. Is there more light? Is there more vessel? If this melody, if this book moves you, it's because the energy is so strong that the words of the song, the words of the book, fail to fully hold down and imprison the energy, and that's why you feel the energy. If you feel the words, the density of the words, but but you're not getting that energy of the story, it's because the structure, the author is paying more attention to structure and to composition than to the idea. It's not a question of whether one is right or one is wrong. It's what one is trying to accomplish, which one is going to overwhelm which. And the Torah is telling us that ultimately, God envisioned a world of tohu that it wasn't going to work. But why does God create a world of tohu if it's prone to failure? If the world cannot survive such light with thin vessels, why create it in the first place? It is because in the aftermath, the world of tikkun, with a memory of a world of tohu, can utilize the energy of inspiration, of light that it knows exists, and incorporate it in a world of tikkun. If the world of tohu never would have been created in the first place, all we would have is a static world of tikkun that can never transcend, that can never get over itself. If there never would have been a world before Noah's flood, the rainbow never would have been able to materialize because What Noach represents is the ability for mankind to emerge and create a world out of the remnants of the world that was before. It's not only a new world, it's a world built on the world. Think of how history works. Think of what archaeology is. Archaeology is the study of civilizations, and each one is built upon the layers of those that came before it. History is progress of generations that came before it. If you don't have what came before, it's not a failure. We don't have a future, we don't have a present, if not for understanding that we are standing on what came before. The world of tikkun works because it emerges from a world of Tohu. This is, in short, how Kabbalah understands this grand cosmic story of creation, of how it works. There had to be something that comes forth that's overwhelming, then steps back, called Tzimtzum, that God contracts, and now a new reality comes that can take advantage of both models. The model of Tikkun, where something can actually actualize, where we as human beings benefit because the vessel is something that we can benefit from, and we are not blinded by the light. On the other hand, we are aware that there is a great light that's greater than what we can comprehend, and that we search for it, that we try to incorporate it. But if there was no world of Tohu, we would be animal-like, and that is, we would be focused only on the structure of our world, that whatever exists within our vessel, that's real. Anything outside that vessel is beyond our capacity to imagine. Now we can go back to our discussion of what Esau and Jacob represented and why this whole story had to play out the way it did. In Kabbalah teaches us that the world of Tohu comes first because it's higher. It's a world of light. Of course, by the same token, we have discussed many times that the nature of physics is that the higher something is, when it falls very, very low, right? When you have a very, very high wall, the bricks that are at the very top, when it falls furthest away from the base. The bricks in the very bottom of the wall, when the wall falls, it falls right there. The idea of Tohu was this grand experiment, so to speak, but it fell. When it crashed, the sparks went to the lowest possible places. And that's why Kabbalah understands that life is about tikkun olam, means in that sense, is to go to the hardest, darkest, most difficult places and to retrieve the sparks that have fallen from the very, very highs to the lowest of lows and to lift them up. This is the grand vision of Kabbalistic thought, in the words of the Arizal, is to find the sparks that have fallen so deep into darkness, because where it originates from a much, much higher level of tikkun. It comes from Tohu. But when it falls all the way down. Esau, our sages tell us, came from the world of Tohu, from the world of chaos, from the world of limitless possibility. But when you fall into the lowest abyss. Jacob represents tikkun. Jacob is a wholesome, static individual. He sits in the tent, and his life is one series of after another of gradual progress, but it's in a very, very narrow extreme, because tikkun is where the vessel is more powerful than the light, whereas tohu, the ratio of light, is much more powerful than the vessel. This tells us, my friends, as we're getting, because we're gonna run out of time, and I want to give people some time too, is now this gives us some insight into this grand story. You see, Isaac understood from the very beginning who Esau was. He knew Esau was a cunning person, a man of the field. He knew that Esau's soul, according to Kabbalah, Esau's soul came from the world of Tohu, came from the world of chaos, came from the highest possible worlds. The problem is that when it came into this world, it shattered. It fell all the way down. Jacob is the world of Tikkun, as we've established. And therefore, Isaac was thought, and he was hoping, that if he shows love, if he shows tremendous affection for his son Esau, What he was trying to do was have Esau live up to his potential of who he could be. Our sages tell us that if Esau would have utilized the gifts that he had a higher soul than Jacob. If you can believe what our sages tell us, Esau had a soul that was much, much greater than Jacob. But because his soul originated from the word of Tohu, it was very volatile. And volatile souls can either be super accomplished, it can be super successful, or it can be unbelievably chaotic and descend into the abyss of rejectionism and destructiveness. And so Isaac thought that if only I can show my love to my son, I can keep him on the narrow. Why? Because Isaac was more prone to this process than anybody before. Remember, we discussed why is it that he was holy in a way that his father and his son wasn't. Isaac was a perfect offering to God. He never left the land of Israel. His whole being, his whole physical being suffused holiness. He was someone who lived in a holy cocoon his entire life. Remember, his father Abraham grew up in Haran with Terach, with Nimrod. He grew up in a life of idolatry. He grew up around people that he had to run away from. Jacob grew up with Esau his entire life and spent 20 years with Laban, and he's living in the world the last 17 years of life in Egypt. Jacob was living a world also of battling the world and trying to remain wholesome in the face of tremendous obstacles. Isaac lives a very, very sheltered life in the land of Israel, really protected. And he was not really ever exposed, it's on a spiritual level, to the great extremes of his father and his son. And therefore, he saw Tohu for what Tohu was, that a person can live a wholesome spiritual life if only they're exposed and given the right circumstances, the right structure. He said he thought he can take Esau and make Esau Jacob and then some. He can take the gift of Esau, what Esau represents from the world of Tohu, and take that great soul, because what he saw in Esau was something that he never had. He saw in Esau the soul of his father, the ability to come from the darkness and transform it into light, to be able to go and reject everything from the past and to do total teshuvah and become the greatest tzaddik of his time. And so Isaac says, I can take Esau and I can make him into that. If only I show him enough love. And if only I give him the blessing. What's the blessing he wants to give him? He wants to give him the material blessing, because he understands that Esau, who is inclined to materialism, who is inclined to the field, who is inclined to hunting, he wants to give him mastery over the physical realm and to transform that into something spiritual, because only Esau can do that. Jacob, on the other hand, he's giving him the blessing, the legacy of Abraham. If you look very closely at the story, I mentioned before that even in his apprehension, Isaac goes ahead and blesses Jacob when he believes that he's being misled, when he's being deceived. And what does he say at the end? He gives him the blessing that when of the dew of the heavens and the fat of the earth. When Esau comes back in, the story continues, and he realizes what happened. He yells out to his father, "Do you have any blessings left?" And his father says, "I already gave. Your brother came and tricked you. I gave him the blessing." And he yells, "Father, but do you have one blessing left?" And he says, "The only blessing that I can give you is that I will give you also by al charbachatich, you will live by the sword, and that you will be subjugated to your brother. But when your brother shall fall, you shall master over him." And then he calls later on his younger son Jacob, and he tells Jacob, I need you to go away. You have to run away because your brother is very angry for what you have done. We don't see Isaac being angry at his son Jacob for what he did. As a matter of fact, he goes on to bless him. He blesses him that God should bless you with the legacy of Abraham. And we see from here that Isaac never intended ever to give Esau the blessing, the spiritual blessings, that was always going to be reserved for Jacob. He never intended him to have the blessing, the legacy of Abraham, and to be the future of the Jewish nation, and of the temple and of Judaism. That was always because the blessing that he intended to give Esau were only material blessings. The fat of the heavens and the dew of the heavens and the fat of the earth, that's what he held for him. The spiritual blessings he was holding back for Jacob regardless. At the end, he ended up giving all that to Jacob with the proviso that when Jacob does not live up to his calling as the chosen people, then they will be harassed, they will be exiled, and Esau, represented by Rome, will subjugate them and dominate them, which is, as we know, is what happened. But Isaac's plan was to give each child the resources they need to fulfill their role by showing them through love, by giving Esau material blessings and giving Jacob spiritual blessings. But you see, Rebekah was the opposite of Isaac. Why was Rebekah the opposite of Isaac? Because Rebekah came from the same background that Abraham came from. I told you that Isaac grew up as the child of Abraham and Sarah, who rejected their previous life after 75 years and went to the land of Israel and forged a new life for themselves. And as we all know the story in the Torah, we read in the portion of Vayeru, we read in Rosh Hashanah, that when Sarah saw that Ishmael was having a negative, deleterious effect on Isaac, she chases away Hagar. She gets rid of Ishmael because she is protecting Isaac. She needs Isaac to grow up in a certain way, sheltered. That's why Isaac is not wise to the ways of Esau in the same way that his wife is. Why? Who is Rebekah? We know who Rebekah was. Rebekah grew up with Lavan, with Bethuel. The Talmud tells us that Rebekah is compared to a thorn, to a rose amongst the thorns. If Abraham and Sarah were surrounded in their youth by paganism and by evil and by spiritual impurity, Rebekah takes it one step further. Rebekah knew a liar and a deceiver when she saw one. She lived with the biggest deceivers that the Torah tells us, Lavan Harami and Bethuel. This was her family. Her family were liars and deceivers. And therefore, she was able to have an insight into the character of Esau and Jacob in a way that Isaac could not do. But so whereas Isaac had this spiritual idea that Esau, because of his lofty spiritual tohu type of soul that came from such a high place that he can transform something that's raw into something that's delicious, Rebekah saw that that wasn't going to work. And that I want to get back to the idea of the food, why the food plays such an important role in the story. The idea behind the food is that Isaac wants Esau to do what? He wants him to capture something. He wants him to hunt something and then prepare it and spice it. Think about what he's asking. Why can't he just go to the local store? Why can't he just ask him to prepare something at home? There is a metaphoric message here that's happening. Hunting means to use your resources to subdue something into somewhere and in a way that the object does not want to be. The definition of hunting means to trap something and to force it into a place where it was never meant to be in the first place. What is Isaac trying to do? Isaac wants to take Esau and have him subdue and trap the spiritual sparks of the world of Tohu and make it holy. He knows Jacob can't do it because Jacob comes from a different world. Jacob is a product of the world of Tikkun. And because Jacob is a product of the world of Tikkun, he has no capacity, he has no access to those type of sparks. Those sparks are way beyond the capacity of Jacob's soul, as wholesome and as tzaddik that he is. He has no capacity. Jacob understands Talmud. He understands Torah. He doesn't understand the world out there, how to change the world and make the world a spiritual place. But you know who can? Esau can, because Esau's a hunter. Esau's a trapper. He's someone who knows how to subdue things and make them into something that they don't want to be. One of the profound ideas that the Kabbalah tells us about the food, what was happening here is that when you take food that's naturally sweet, that's naturally palatable, and you spice it and you garnish it what you're doing is you're drawing out a type of flavor that was previously there but was hidden, and by using your resources of to the degree that you are a trained chef, you can bring out a tart and use all types of spices and to make food and to taste something that's not natural to the essence of what it is, right? For those who spend a lot of time on Food Network, right? All these shows that have become very popular, it's just allowing food, taking food that are naturally sweet is great. That's tikkun. Everybody can make the same types of dishes, right? Whether of how you grew up, and everybody makes the same thing, and it's good enough. Those who know how to go beyond and become celebrated and are out of the world chefs are people who see things in this food to change it and to subdue it and to bring out flavor and essence from it in a way that nobody else can, nobody else saw, and to use it in a way that was never used before, to use that ingredient in a way that was never used before. In order to do that, you have to be able to look outside the box and not see that dish in the way that millions of people before you and present see that, because then you're just going to be recreating the same thing. To change the cuisine requires an outer understanding of what the possibilities are that nobody else conceived of before. This is the depth of what's happening in this drama of the story that Isaac is hinting to Esau. He goes, I need you to go hunting. I need you to trap. I need you to transform this food, because the metaphor is the blessings that I need to give you, I can give only to you. I can't give to Jacob. Do you know why I love you so much, Esau? Is because you have the capacity and the capability to hunt sparks, to hunt spirituality, to bring from the primordial world that God destroyed because the world couldn't sustain it. But you can take that and make from this world tikkun olam, to make a world of tikkun out of those sparks of tohu that Jacob has no access to. Jacob's a good cook, but he's not the kind of person who's going to think outside the box, who has the ability to cultivate and to hunt and to subdue those sparks, those flavors, those lights that you can. In the final analysis, though, Rebecca was right and Isaac was wrong. Isaac's intention, his impulse was correct. Isaac wanted to bring back the world of Tohu and reorient it with the world of Tikkun. Isaac wanted to unite those two worlds of Tohu and Tikkun and bring what he thought would be the messianic combination of Tohu and Tikkun, of the Garden of Eden and the physical world, of the world before the flood and the world post-flood. That's what he was trying to do. He was trying to bring the gift of Esau and the gift of Jacob and bring them together. The power, the grandiose of Rome, and the wholesomeness and spirituality of Jacob, of Judea. Imagine if Rome and Judea can come together and complement each other. How philosophy, how materialism, architecture, art, and then use the Torah and use spirituality to complement each other. That's what Isaac was after. But Rebecca was wiser, because she understood that as long as Mashiach is not here, these two worlds are not ready for that yet. Isaac and Jacob are not ready to hold hands yet. Because she saw Esau and Jacob are ready to hold hands, because she saw what Esau still was. Esau was someone, as the Torah says, why did Isaac love him? Because he was a hunter in his mouth. Rashi tells us what it means is he was able to say everything that his father wanted to hear. He knew all the nice things to say. He knew all the platitudes. He knew how to deceive his dad. Rebecca was not so easily deceived, because you can't deceive someone who grew up around deception their entire life. And that's why she saw Jacob for who he was, and she saw Esau for who he was. But she couldn't tell her husband. It's not that they didn't agree. It's not Rebecca, going back to her question, it's not that Isaac and Rebecca didn't have a good relationship and marriage. They couldn't discuss it between themselves. The issue was they were coming from different worldviews, and it was a fundamental disagreement. Of course, they tried to talk it amongst themselves. But Isaac was convinced that he could rehabilitate. And Rebecca says that she saw that Esau, at that point in his life, was not ready to be rehabilitated, and was going to destroy, use those blessings, use those gifts that Isaac was going to give him, and rather than heal the world, use that power to destroy the world, is what Esau actually did. And therefore, she had to create a deception that Jacob should go in and deceive his father to get it. Why? Because in summation, my friends, we're going back to the original story. How did the story of the Garden of Eden emerge? It was a deception of the serpent that deceived Adam and Eve, that got them expelled from the Garden of Eden. And here we have what's called the story of reverse deception. The deception of allowing Jacob to get the blessings. Deep down, Isaac knew what was happening, and he relented because he realized that in order for spirituality to survive, it's going to have to be able to live in a world where it is weaker than the world of materialism, but be deceptive enough to use the materialism of the world to advance the goals of spirituality. Therefore, you see, we live in a world where it's much harder to advance the advances of Torah than to advance technology or materialism. But the job of a Jew is very difficult indeed. But we have to understand that Isaac gave us both blessings. He gave us the blessing of materialism. Also, he gave us the blessing of the legacy of Abraham, because deep down he understood that in order for Torah to influence the physical world, and there has to be a world of tikkun that is built upon the world of tohu, and only the world of tikkun can take the world of tohu and elevate it and transform it into what it was meant to be. When Mashiach will come, the Kabbalists tell us, the souls of tohu, the souls of Esau, will come back and will be rehabilitated. But until that time comes, we all know it's very, very hard to rehabilitate high flyers because they live beyond the capacity of tikkun. And it's a very hard process to get them to come into therapy and to get them to come and to narrow the vision and to narrow the immensity of their passion and to create structure. We all want relationships with endless passion and ideas. We all want to have this unbridled idea of what can be. But the practicality of the world that we receive is that God wants us to take Torah and hunt and manipulate the physical world within the lens of Torah, to take tohu and subdue tohu into a world of tikkun, to make the greatest passion of our relationship into the day by day of what we are doing. The great love of v'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha uv'chol nafshecha uv'chol nodecha. How do we do that? V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'reitecha. Put on a mezuzah and study Torah. It may sound trudgy. It may sound lacking of this great vision that we want to love. We want to love God. But the Torah says, you know how you come to love God? But the same way you come to love the people around you. What are you doing for them? Just saying, Hashem, I love you, but you don't do it to show anything you love, is a light without a vessel. It's ideas without book. It's an idea without words. It's a book that has only ink, but no structure. And this, in the final analysis, is how Kabbalah understands what was the story of these wrestling twins from the very beginning of time. Because the question was, who outduels who? What is more transcendent? Is it the world of passion, of ideas, of influence, of power? Or is it the world of structure? Is it the world of practicality and pragmatism, not the world of living only in the world of potential? So the Tohu personality in our lives has a great potential for good, but also has a great potential to use that idea only to further for self-aggrandizement, to use it to really harm not only themselves, but the entire world around them. Tikkun is the capacity to be able to be in control. and to be able to utilize maybe lesser light, but to put it firmly in a vessel and have that vessel actually have function in this world. And so whereas Isaac sees the lofty God in reality, Isaac sees potential for what it is, Isaac sees for what the world, what it could be, Rebecca is the pragmatist. Isaac is the idealist. Rebecca is the pragmatist. And that's why she encourages Jacob to do what he had to do, because she understands that in this world, the first woman, her great-great-great-great-grandmother, Eve, was the one who was deceived by the serpent. And now Rebecca is going to use that deception in the reverse to use the world, to use the light of Tikkun to deceive the world, because ultimately Kabbalah understands the world does not want to be a vessel. The vessel gets agitated by the light. The world does not want to be reminded that it has to do something good. The vessel does not want to be told by the light what it should do. But in order to do that, there's an element of deception. Deception means that you get something or someone to do something that you want that they don't really want. The idea in this our world is when we do mitzvah, when we actualize the Torah's vision for the world, it always involves a certain subtle element of deception, because it's the vessel trying to force the light to behave in a way that it doesn't. The light wants to break free. The light wants to be full of passion. It doesn't want to be held down. It doesn't want to be tied down. But the vessel says, oh, hold on a minute. Light without a vessel is a light that just dissipates and disappears. And therefore, the structure of the glass is what's going to give light its fullest expression in our physical world. So what is our takeaway?
Lesson 3. Jacob and Esau. 1. The two kingdoms embodied by the biblical Jacob and Esau exist on many levels. As the historic nations of Judea and Rome, as the spiritual and material perspectives on life, as the altruistic and selfish instincts in the human psyche, and as the cosmic worlds of Tikkun and Tohu. 2. Everything is composed of light and vessels, the pure energy of the thing and the structures and the mechanisms through which it operates. But there are two models of existence. The Tikkun model is one of scant light and abundant vessels, meaning that the vessels contain and focus their energies. In the Tohu model, there is abundant light and scant vessels, meaning that the driving energy is constantly bursting free of the structures through which it is meant to operate. 3. Each model has its advantages and disadvantages. Tikkun is harmonious and orderly, but constrained. Tohu is innovative and limit-breaking, but also strife-ridden and unstable. An additional disadvantage to the Tohu model is that it is prone to corruption, resulting either in the dissipation of its energies or in their exploitation by evil. 4. Because Tohu preceded Tikkun, we can tap the advantages of both models, drawing on the powerful Tohu elements present in our Tikkun reality as remnants of an earlier world. But this is also the reason that the Jacob in us, our instincts for spirituality and altruism, faces an uphill battle in its efforts to master the more primordial Tohu forces in our eternal Esau, the unbridled passions of the animal soul, the uncontainable force of the human ego, and the unsatisfiable ambitions of a materialistic life. 5. Isaac believed that Tohu and Tikkun could coexist side by side, each blessed with resources to fully develop its realm in accordance with the divine plan for creation. Rebecca, however, understood that the material world that is ruled by materialists will not rise to its true purpose, but will descend into corruption. The powerful resources of Tohu can only be redeemed when Jacob is made master of Esau. 6. In our own lives, we need to internalize both sides of the Isaac-Rebecca argument. Like Isaac, we need to recognize the powerful potential for good that lies in our tohu self. Like Rebecca, we need to understand that in order to properly utilize this potential, we have to place our tikkun self firmly in control of our lives. 7. Every time we interact with the material world, we reenact the drama of the stolen blessings. We become a spiritual Jacob who assumes the guise of a materialistic Esau in caring about the material success for the ulterior motive of making our world a holier, more godly place.